Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I just want to welcome everybody to this session, the Planners Roundtable. I would also like to thank Tanner from ITE, who's our tech guru on this session. So thank you, Tanner, for all of your help getting things set up. Your presenters today have worked really hard at putting together valuable information to share with you. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit about each one of them so that you get to know who you're listening to today. Ted Knowlton is the Deputy Director at the Wasatch Front Regional Council. He is also the current president of the Utah chapter of the American Planning Association and is the Planning Commission Chair for North Salt Lake City. Kirsten Whetstone is the community planner in Summit County, and she is the current vice president and incoming president-elect for the Utah chapter of the American Planning Association. So Ted and Kirsten, thank you so much for being here today. For you participants, we want this session to be as interactive as possible, and we want to hear from all of you. So please speak up, don't be shy. You can also leave your comments and questions in the chat box, and Ted and Kirsten will include them in the conversation. So before we get started and before I turn the time over to Ted, we are going to run a quick poll just to see who's joining us today. So Tanner, would you mind throwing that up there? And then if everybody could just select the option that, that suits you best. Perfect. So it looks like the majority of the members on this call today are city staff, state or county government, and I love this one, just love to attend conferences. So welcome everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Ted. Thanks, Ted.
All right. Thanks a lot, Katie. And how are you all? It's so good to see you all. Welcome to day 3 of the Bizarro Conference. You know, this has been a pretty interesting thing. Let's play around here just a touch. Give me your thumbs up if you are a member of the American Planning Association Utah chapter, or any chapter. Doesn't have to be Utah chapter.
Thumbs up. How do I do that?
It's under reactions. Now look, it's okay if you're not. I'm just more curious than anything. I'm going to put a link into the chat bar that includes information on how you become a member. And it's super easy. And if you're a student, it's totally free. If you're a planning commissioner, it's very, very inexpensive. And it gets less expensive if your whole commission is a member, and there's details on that. But APAUtah has 600 or 700 members, you know, public sector, private sector, all different types of communities. And we really support each other. We support each other with best practices, with friendship, when there are challenging issues. And that's kind of the spirit of this session. So this session is kind of doing double duty. It's a chance for us to check in with each other, but it will inform the activities of the chapter in the coming year. So we will build on this conversation to put pencil to paper, as they did in the olden days, about how should the chapter's resources be used to help us strengthen each other as a profession here in Utah. Okay, so let's jump on in, all right? Here's what you're gonna see: a little whiteboard, bam. Now, the way you access that whiteboard is, help me out, Katie. You go to the top of your screen on the right, you'll see something called, what is it, Katie? Options?
So it says view options. And then once you click on the little down arrow, it'll give you an option and it says annotate. Click on the annotate button, and then you'll just want to hit the text option. And then you'll be able to type in all of your comments right there.
Here is the question at hand. I would like you to hit the text button and type in an answer to this. As a planner, what structural challenges are you thinking about? Okay, if you see somebody else that put what you wanted to put down, then put a check mark next to it. You can do more than one. All right, do as many as you feel like. Now, why would we do this? I think that this is me feeling a little bit while you're like noodling on this. I think that we're in this massive time of change as a profession for so many reasons. Our cities are changing due to COVID-19. Our cities are changing due to just rapid growth, fastest growth in the last 10 years. Our cities are changing due to new technologies. Public engagement has changed. The issues themselves have changed dramatically. And you undoubtedly are thinking about one or more of these issues, and what are they? And while you're doing that, I'd also welcome anybody who wants to opine. You want to, verbalize what you're thinking about.
There's a couple of comments in the chat that I concurred with. What do you mean by structural, Ted?
Okay, structural meaning it's not necessarily about one development. It's not necessarily about the interactions with one city councilor. It's something that you're seeing a pattern of. You're seeing a new challenge that has created a pattern in your work. Or you see something on the horizon, a large issue that your community, you're afraid is going to have to grapple with. And it's more than just about one specific decision. Let's take a look at some of these while you keep going, and just keep on going. Polarization. That's what you wanted to do. I've had problems with the little text cube itself. Polarization is a massive issue in our country. Are you all feeling this in your community as well? Does your community feel more polarized than it used to? There's a lot of check marks next to that. What does that look and feel like, by the way? What are the consequences of it for you as a planner? Kirsten, I didn't give you a chance to say hello and do some introductory comments. Do you want to do that now while I'm—
Sure, I can jump in. I was going to thank everybody for attending this conference on a beautiful fall Friday afternoon. And just to reiterate that we wanted this to be interactive, and it looks like we're getting a good start on that. And I put polarization there because that was one of the things that I thought it would be interesting to hear from the planners. We know there's a lot of polarization at the federal level, national level, and yet we have so many important issues to address in this country. Does that carry down to your local communities? Are you finding that it's more difficult to get things done in your communities? I would guess that it's less of an impact or a hurdle to get things done in communities, but it certainly is there. And there's so many important things that in housing, transportation, health issues, environmental, clean air, clean water, all these things that are things we need to do. But if we're polarized when we talk about it, that was one of the things I was hoping we could get out of this is, well, how do planners, we have so many tools in getting people to consensus. So what are things that are working for you to get us doing what good community planning is to try to reach consensus? We don't have to all agree, but how do we move forward? And I think that's sort of what I was interested in getting some ideas and having this discussion on that. So thank you. Oh, I was also going to mention if Francisco Astorga is on this meeting. I'm not sure he's here, but if he is, I wanted to recognize Francisco as the incoming vice president of the chapter. So if you're here, Francisco, if you want to say a few words, jump on.
Don't see him.
Okay. We have 36 participants at this point. What else?
There's a little bit of a theme here, right? Polarization, NIMBY. We all know that acronym, not in my backyard, and citizen resistance to housing and good planning principles. And those three things have a lot in common. Are you saying that it's different than it was even just a few years ago, or has this just been our constant companion as a planning community? Anybody want to comment on that? Does it feel different?
Hey, Ted, this is Francis.
Hey, go for it.
Hey, so I would say that there, in my experience throughout the years, there's been a lot of resistance to housing affordability, but I'm going to suggest that something funny is happening, at least in Mill Creek. I think the political conversation on housing affordability and even density somewhat has changed a little bit. And maybe it's because Mill Creek is a purple trending blue city. The discussion on housing affordability kind of flipped when our kind of local cultural conscience over race issues bubbled up this summer. And I'm seeing a lot of people actually tie resistance to housing affordability, or resistance to density and housing availability to kind of these issues related to racism and redlining. Okay. And I don't know whether it's really a grassroots thing or an organized thing, but it is happening. And it's happening in Mill Creek, and it's kind of changing the conversation because people are actually showing up and saying, yeah, you need to permit this project because it increases opportunity for housing in our city. And that's not something I've ever heard before.
Can you all let's do the thumbs up game again. Does that ring true to you? And I'm gonna look for other reactions in addition to Frank's take. You're getting that sense too. To the extent that things feel different. By the way, I felt like a year ago, before race and equity questions got elevated, and before COVID-19, that in Utah we were in the middle of the most pronounced kind of community level of freak out about growth issues. So we were already, I think, at an elevated DEFCON 4. And then we added two. I liked the way that Reverend Davis said it. I don't know if you heard this in the intro. He called it pandemics plural. We have a pandemic of not effectively dealing with inequality. That's a pandemic. And then we have the COVID-19 pandemic. So now we have the two different pandemics on top of it. Is there anything else you would throw in the mix besides those things? Growth, race and equity, COVID-19, that makes it different. And then let's start talking about, so what do we do to help each other? I mean, what do you think we can do to help each other? Or is that something that, we just need shoulders to cry on?
I think what's added is social media. It's easy to post some outrageous thing on social media, get hundreds of people up in arm that, oh my gosh, the city's doing this or the county's doing this, and you've lost the battle before the first gun is shot.
Okay, look,
yeah,
I
would
agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. That.
Go ahead, Kirsten.
No, I was going to say I completely agree. I think that what happens is you have people looking at that and confusing what the facts are, or just the rumor mill. It's a lot more prevalent, I think, and gets going. It takes on its life of its own, and at the one time, these meetings have really, like the Zoom meetings for our planning commission meetings, council meetings, have really driven the numbers of people attending up, which is great. And the participation from the community is great. But then on the other hand, where you have that, so much of the social media driving the facts, and I would say that for a planner to try to catch up with that is to make sure that we're keeping web pages updated about projects or about where the town is going, or the goals or the visions, and that you almost have to reply to that on an official county or city website. So yeah.
I'm gonna do a critique of the chapter itself. I don't remember a training, and maybe you all can help me out with this, but I don't remember a training in a conference or a webinar in which we've focused on how do we counteract misinformation? How do we work with social media? If social media is driving the conversation locally, what is the appropriate role of a planner in that space? Have we done that?
I am not aware of that. I think that's something we should put on the list.
No, but can we?
Can we? And who knows? Who would lead such a training?
Well, let's kind of flush out some ideas here. By the way, it's like birds in a meadow. It's not flushing in another way. It's just flushing out the birds like from a meadow. So if we're flushing out ideas, who feels like, you know, I have some experience here. I have some things to offer, or I have seen people that have been effective, and you're willing to kind of be part of consolidating some good thinking as a chapter on this. Put your name in the chat bar. You can even volunteer somebody else in the chat bar. It never makes sense to recreate the wheel.
Right.
I think we can use ideas and resources that undoubtedly are already out there, but it would be really good for us to speak to experience as well and get to know those people. Are we seeing anything pop up in the chat bar?
Not seeing.
You're not
anything.
committing to do anything.
There's a new message
here. Put your name in the
here.
chat bar. You have not committed yourself to producing something. You have given people the right to reach out to you, though. All right.
So we did receive a message from Frank Lilly. It says that we've had a lot of experience with this in Mill Creek, so I can help. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Sweet. And Megan, did you get kicked out of a Facebook group? Yeah, that can be awkward for sure. We're going to put this on the list of a focus area for the chapter to rally around next year. One of the things we did this year is we got the infrastructure of our chapter communications much more in order this year. We have a brand new website, you know this. We have a new commitment to utilizing at least Twitter. I'm not really sure if we're using Facebook, but this doesn't deal with the problems that we're dealing with that you're mentioning, but it may help us be in a position where the chapter could potentially be helpful. What would you brainstorm are ways that we could help each other besides a training on this front? Trainings, documents.
Are there articles out there where other communities maybe have gotten ahead of this that we could share on the website? If we can get people to the website, that might be an idea.
Have the issues in communities themselves, has the substance of planning changed lately that has led to a different dynamic with NIMBYs? Is there a substantive component, not just a process or engagement component? And I guess maybe that was redundant. Part of it may be COVID, perhaps. Taylor, there was the PIO discussion at the Moab conference that had some good ideas. Okay, we'll look up who was involved in that one.
Ted, I would add on the NIMBYs discussion, there's been formation of groups, and in particular, there's the Citizens for Responsible Growth. I think part of the challenge there is some of these groups say they're promoting growth, but they're not really necessarily spending time in education and working on policies and joining the process. They say responsible growth is really no growth is what they're promoting, and yet they're very well organized. They know the social media tools, they know all of that, right. And so their firepower is really good, but yet they're not coming to the table and not spending time to be acquainted with the issues. And so I've seen some cases where they flat out deny that we have a housing gap, that there is actually even a housing problem. And that's kind of a challenge. If your NIMBY group just flat out rejects basic data by government agencies that we have an issue, then it's hard to even have a conversation at that point.
Right. If you could wave a magic wand of help and resources or something, and maybe the chapter can't do what you're looking for, but what would be helpful in this? If there are a lot of groups that are sort of out there, they're well organized. The planning community kind of I would say is a player in state policy making formally, but is not a big player in state policy conversations broadly. Would you agree with that? Should we be?
I will add that I'm from out of state. I'm one of those awful Californians that you've listed on there.
You're not awful. Californians are people too.
I grew up in Utah, but we're starting to see the formation of YIMBY groups. Yes, in my backyards, and they have good published information about why housing is good, why transportation is good, and I think that's something that the Utah chapter could publish. Just have that so that you could pull that off the chapter website and put it on your own website and say, here's why this particular transit-oriented development or this affordable housing development benefits the community.
Yeah, I agree.
Let me be really frank. Part of the reason why the planning community hasn't been actively part of the broad dialogue on issues before is we don't really have a lot of political clout. However, we are experts, right? We've spent our careers studying these things, and maybe we have credibility that way. Just brainstorm with me a little bit the pros and cons, or what we might do that you think is realistic and could be effective.
Do we want to do a new whiteboard for that? Maybe people be more comfortable writing them down. Is it possible to save this one and get a new one?
Yeah, I have saved it. So okay. Katie, how do we do a new whiteboard?
You know what? I'm not sure. Taylor, can you help, or Tanner, can you help us with this?
Ed, you should just be able to click, whoever created the whiteboard should just be able to click on the clear.
I got it. Okay,
Perfect.
done.
There we go.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks, Jordan.
All right, well, we have that out there, and there's a lot of other questions we could go down, but who has a new thing you want to throw into the mix in this roundtable? Like pretend like it's a big fat roundtable.
I would be interested in exploring that a little bit, that we don't have the political clout. And when you say we, I suppose you mean as planners all over and as the chapter. But we certainly have lots of experts in these fields of these major issues that we face, you know, locally and statewide. So, and you're talking about maybe what structural things that maybe the chapter can do, or what are people doing to address that? Where you
some of you have jobs that work with organizations that might be very loosely like a professional chapter. I don't think we necessarily have to funnel all of these questions through the chapter. It could be that there are things that we can do as a profession, and maybe the chapter doesn't have its name on it. But it's hard for me to think of something that would be worthwhile and tackle something structural that doesn't at least involve collaboration between individuals. But I'm mastering the art of being vague. And so, which is probably not helping anybody in this conversation, but I'm opening the door for you to walk in. You know, Ted, APAUtah, man, but I have another idea. Fun.
And Ted, we've had a few people comment in the chat box. Megan shared a link. Thank you, Megan. It's Yes in My Backyard, Utah. And then Sky also said that National Institute for Civil Discourse, U of Arizona, is another excellent resource.
Utah.
APA itself has good partnerships with the Housing Gap Coalition. If you all are not utilizing the materials from the Housing Gap Coalition, I would suggest that you do that. That is a Utah-based organization. What other things would you throw out in that mix?
Any connections with the Clean Air, the HEAL group? We partner with them for anything, and so this is a partnership with Utah League of Cities and Towns in terms of this conference, and maybe there's other opportunities to partner with other organizations in their conferences or monthly meetings or separate events.
So let's change gears. If you're thinking about the issues that your community is facing, that our state is facing, that the United States is facing, hey, you could say the planet is facing, where do you think there is the biggest gap in, where do you think the biggest knowledge gaps are with the people you work with? Where do you think the biggest gaps are in your own practice? You know, just let's opine a little bit about issues and how we can grapple with the issues that we're dealing with. Let's start putting a list of issues on the board.
Hey, Ted, this is Taylor. I work in Cache County, and I was just going to say a lot of the issues I have are opposite from everyone else. I work with a lot of small towns that don't have staff. They can't get the full planning commission, and you can't get people to a public meeting. So there's a lot of feeling of, well, everything will happen in Logan, and we don't care what happens. And So I have the opposite problem, is trying to get people involved, finding ways to get them involved. So that's what we're dealing with.
Taylor, I'm glad you said that. And you know, planning is not a one size fits all. You know, our profession is as varied as the communities that are represented in League of Cities and Towns. And so I would say, you know, let's put that up there. And if there is, you know, a group of communities and their needs are sort of constantly not being met, and there might be a way, I don't know how, to help with that, then we all should explore it, the royal we, right?
Let's see. Okay.
Jordan, I bet you guys have grappled with those kinds of lack of funding, lack of staff support among the members that you work with as well. And do you want to introduce your role? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, it's okay. I appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jordan Ketcher. I'm with the state's community development office, and we're a new office. We're only 7 years old, but we're situated within the housing and community development division. So we're based in Salt Lake City, but we support regional planners throughout the state, and we predominantly support rural communities. And so, yeah, Taylor, like what you're saying, and up in Cache County and having difficulty and just trying to figure out how to bring more people together and et cetera has definitely been a challenge. I will say that for a number of communities that I've been talking with since COVID, I've definitely seen an increase in participation with public meetings. I will say that perhaps some are maybe a bit hesitant to continue on that route, perhaps if the pandemic does ever end. But I will say that there's a good amount of individuals that are really excited about this turnout and excited to see how they can propel it forward. I hear, and I'm sure that most of you have also heard this too, but you know, with working predominantly with rural communities throughout the state, I've heard often this, you know, we've advertised it, right? It's out there, we did our job and no one showed up. And so I'm really hoping that this is an opportunity for us to reframe how, you know, when we think about equity, when we think about justice and getting our citizens involved locally with local issues. I'm hoping that this is sort of the impetus for reframing how we're engaging, even if it's difficult, right? Even if there is misinformation, et cetera. It's hard work, but sorry, just got a little rambly there, but yeah, definitely have seen a full spectrum, at least in the communities that I've been talking with lately.
Thanks a lot. If stuff gets onto these whiteboards or into the chat box, we're gonna seek to grapple with it as a chapter in the coming weeks. And I just want to reiterate that point. So we're kind of treating this session as brainstormy. We're not going to really land on potentially hard answers. I think the closest we've gotten to it so far is we will work on some training elements associated with social media. But I just want you to know that it's the very process of you saying something and putting on the whiteboard is getting these ideas out there. So let me say this: if you have something to say and the questions that have been posed haven't given you the chance to say it, then you can go ahead and do that in the spirit of a roundtable. So let's do distrusting professional studies. Can somebody unpack that?
Well, I put it up there because we've had recent items that have come in front of the Planning Commission where there've been professional studies, and I've never seen so much distrust in the numbers, and say well, the community needs to do their own study, transportation studies or economic impact studies or things like that. And that creates, I mean, I think that creates difficulties for decision makers. Seems like there are other people that have experienced this.
This is interesting. I looked it up in preparation for this session. You know, what's the level of trust for government? Trust for local government is still very high. It's basically unchanged over the last, let's say, 15 years. Trust for the federal government has steadily declined every year since 9/11. 9/11, that year and the year after that was super high. It's fallen every year. But the new phenomenon is a distrust for journalism and a distrust for a debate over the validity of scientific inquiry. And it feels like this is part of that story to me.
I feel like we're studying the studies, we're peer reviewing everything, and with the new electeds, one of the struggles is, you know, of course, confidence in staff, and so study their studies too. Or really, it's more like, you know, just believing a handout that's given at the podium from a concerned citizen that's not based in factual information. So now let's spend a month studying that handout. So, you know, just kind of speaks to the trust of our own selves, which, as you know, ebbs and flows. I think also in the South Valley, there's a little bit of, I don't know, just concern about some big level traffic studies and things like that that have been, you know, extra political down in these parts.
I would love to follow up with you afterward, Grant, and learn a little bit more about what you're getting at. But I won't high center this meeting.
Southwest Vision, Olympia Hills, et cetera, Blue Line Study, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Is there something to be done, or is this just something that we need to learn how to deal with? What do we do? What do we do if there is there's less trust in information, and maybe it's even healthy distrust of a proliferation of information? Pretend like you had unending money and you had countless resources. Let's just start with the big idea. Don't avoid saying the big idea because you're like, oh, this is just the tiny little APAUtah chapter, and you know, 20 fun people with very little influence. I'm not even going to say it. Like, what would you do, right?
Well, I would. I think one of the problems with how we convey traffic studies is that they're jarring against people's expectations for how a street should perform. And you know, traffic engineers and city planners have a different understanding about how a street should perform than, you know, someone who's not and who just wants to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. And part of this is, you know, how we communicate kind of what our expectations for how a street ought to perform, particularly in a mixed use context where a little bit of traffic and a lot of friction is actually a good thing. And, you know, we've had some success of that here in Mill Creek, but a lot of failure because, again, I think people are thinking that, you know, a street should be free and easy as much as possible. And part of that's just a change for, you know, the Utah urban experience, right? And I don't know how to communicate that well to people to get them acclimated to the fact that we are a bigger urban area and our expectations for how our streets ought to perform has to change. I don't know the answer to that question.
It's almost so if you have that knowledge and that I think that goes along with sort of in the country, this skepticism of people who know things or the science experts, just not trusting that experts really know what they're talking about, or because, well, my neighbor said blah, 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 and that goes counter to what you're saying. So obviously I don't know who's telling the truth. And, you know, I think, so how do you address that with, how do you get that information, the facts? And
what if we had a space on our website where we, when we know certain assertions are getting a lot of play out there, and we take them and we unpack them a little bit. Here's the assertion. Here's what the data tells us. It might be like, you've seen these websites like PolitiFact, right? Well, did that politician actually lie, or was that the truth? Well, let's break it down a little bit for you. You know, we couldn't do that exhaustively, but we could possibly do some of that.
so it's almost maybe we have a section of the website that's the debate, where because there's always two sides, if not more, of an issue. So maybe we invite that kind of debate, although I hesitate, but I mean, it would be good to get it out there. What are the two sides of this issue? You know, I was thinking so climate change. And for that, there's people that don't believe it at all. And there's people that say, yeah, it's going to be the biggest issue facing well, the next generation, but it's facing us today. There are people that don't agree with that. So how do you unpackage that and go, why do you think that? Why do you think that? And I don't know, maybe some sort of location on the website or articles where we're inviting, let's hear the two sides. Let's hear, I don't know. Is that worth it? Would be interesting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because I think you could unpackage, as Ted and I had talked about this before, you could unpackage that, say, well, let's not talk about climate change. Let's just talk about what are those impacts. And we have fires, we have bad air, we have transportation issues, we have economic, inequalities. So are some of these things that are going to get worse as the climate changes, or as we have less winter, or however, whatever the changes are happening, what are those impacts? And so maybe don't call it climate change. We've been through this. A lot of people have been through this. We're not going to call it global warming, but so maybe there are ways to try to reach I don't know if it's reaching consensus. It's just honestly looking at where people are coming from on various issues.
Barton, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's use this multimedia that we have. Let's use YouTube and social media and all that. And people's attention span is like 30 seconds or a minute. So you got to put those 30-second or minute little spots together that you can put out there and say, here's what we mean when we're talking about climate change. Here's what we mean when we're talking about, level of service A, or traffic problems, or things like that. Use pictures, use video, things like that. I know in one issue that I was dealing with, all the neighbors were really upset about, how much traffic was in their neighborhood. And we just went out there and during the busy time and shot video and said, here's how much traffic's in your neighborhood. And you'd see a car come, and then 20 seconds later, there'd be another car come, and 15 seconds later, there's another car comes. So it was just very visual. So I think we need to use all those resources.
This is what X vehicles per hour actually looks like. Yeah.
That's exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a good one. Visual techniques, because that is the way people get their information now, in 30-second bites and visual. And you don't need to pack a whole lot of facts into it, but just address small bites. Okay, are there some other issues?
One thing our mayor has liked over the years. And I know for staff, it creates more work. So I don't always recommend him as, you know, since everyone's concerned about speeding in town, let's get a citizens committee about speeding. And so through the whole thing, he believes that the education they get about how to analyze speeding and traffic will, you know, diffuse through the community and provide some more, you know, validity to the policy that, and then they can understand it. Maybe they have a role in helping it. And so for like speeding, that goodwill from one of those committees lasted years, but now we're starting over now with stop signs and speeding. So it doesn't last forever.
That's a good
That's a
story,
great idea. Let's see who's on the, let's see what we got on the chat. Yeah, I agree that Jake said, almost everyone agrees that Utah has a problem with air pollution. It's easier discussion than climate change and closer to home. Yeah, and then that's kind of what I was thinking, that you look at it that way. Same thing with transportation and transit-oriented development. When you bring it home, it's tied to the air quality. It's also tied to that idea that I can't get from A to B as fast as I used to. So the traffic congestion and then I suppose also with the housing issue seems to be in some communities being more accepted, that not everybody's going to live in a single family house spread out throughout the whole valley. Not everybody wants that. And so those three things really are tied together.
What I'm thinking is maybe we do two major things in our remaining time. Let's open it up to a full-on roundtable open mic. And I don't want to put people on the spot by going person to person. And so what I would say is, if you want to say something, you want to talk about something, pose a question, you have a comment, doesn't matter. Let's do the hands up sign, okay? Let's do the hands up sign. If you do that in the next minute, then we'll give you your open mic minute.
Ted, do you want to save the whiteboard, clear it so then we can see everybody?
Yeah, I'll do that.
That'd be great.
So that is saved.
Okay.
And now it's cleared. And so we'll do that. And then a closing question, depending on how that roundtable goes, is how we get to know each other. Networking, socialization, it's really hard, obviously, in the time of COVID. In some ways it's easier, but I think I've heard some criticism through the years, which I think is valid, which is, you know, we don't really know how to party that well. So what are your suggestions on that? Or it could be, no, we're good. You know, Ted, I don't need to know you that well. It's all right. But that'll be our closing, depending on how the roundtable goes. If something comes out of the roundtable, we'll talk about it. So help me see who has, you can put your hands up now. I know there's going to be so many of them. I know it.
So Ted, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
And then I think there we go.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody there?
Alma, can I ask you to dig into your community force in our roundtable section?
Sure. I just you know, like the idea of what can we do on something, and we've talked a little bit about the inequality and social unrest around you know, some of the systematic racism issues, and you know, how do you set something like that up? Could the APAUtah chapter help in looking in what it takes to get a community force responding with the police? You know, is that something that a planner should initiate, or should that come more from the police force itself? I'm not sure. wondering what thoughts were on that.
But define, I'm sorry if you already did, but define community force. What was
I'm
that?
sorry. With community force, he talked about some of the models that had happened in Camden, where anytime the police respond, and I haven't had a chance to look more into it, but anytime the police respond, somebody from the community can go with them for some of those issues that might not be an immediate public threat. So that there's de-escalation, so that there's somebody with the police who understand the neighborhood, who understand the neighbors, who know, the issues going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have some thoughts. I am interested in having APAUtah define better what they plan to be. For me, a professional association means it's an organization that offers me learning opportunities to meet my AICP certification. We have the conferences, and I think we should give scholarships. I guess I'm not so willing to kind of lob into all sorts of community issues until I feel like as a member I'm getting value for paying the fees I do. So I think I would like, I'd like to look at an internal focus on satisfying the professional development needs of the organization. That's how I see a professional organization.
Helen, does it relate to your good comment if there's a sort of a detailed membership questionnaire that goes out to help us assess the extent to which people feel like those core needs are being met?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine, And another thing is...
Well, the reason I say that is that, there's a presumption that those needs are being met, but that may not be the case. So we have to find that out.
Yeah. And what can we do? What more can we do?
Right. And I think that, besides the conference, I would think, a professional development experience like every other month would be helpful, Okay. But it feels like, we have the conference and we have Wilf do the legislative update. But consciously in my mind, that's all I can think that we do. We may do more, but it's not penetrating my brain for whatever reason. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
I appreciate that.
Anybody else?
Meg?
I got a hand up, Kirsten. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I just want to put a little plug in for a lot of these planning challenges that you guys have shared during this meeting. There are a couple of resources out there that have a quickly approaching deadline. Within the Wasatch Front Regional Council area, of course, there's the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program. But outside of that, for the whole state of Utah, there's UDOT's Technical Planning Assistance Program. Speaking on behalf of that a little bit, it's just planning technical assistance in many forms. So if you're having challenges with public engagement, questioned studies that you'd like to take another stab at, whatever the challenge is, there's a letter of intent deadline approaching on the 30th, and you're welcome to reach out to me or to your friends at UDOT and ask for more information about those planning technical assistance programs.
Great. Thank
you. We also have partners, Helen just spoke with Salt Lake County and UTA. They're all going to be good resources for that.
Thanks, Meg. Who would like to take the microphone? Jordan?
Thanks, Ted. I just wanted to share two things. The first of which is that I had the pleasure in the beginning of this year to take the International Association for Public Participation, IAP2. They have a public engagement 5-day course that you can take. I have 2 giant pamphlets booklets, if you will, of just public engagement techniques, strategies, etc. So when we're talking about these difficult conversations, right, and we think about dialogue, etc., for you as planners, if you are interested in hosting some sort of event that can kind of bring your community together, etc., please feel free to reach out to me about ideas and how to structure something like that. I love that kind of work a ton. And I also wanted to mention too that I've been teaching on the side at the University of Utah, and we are looking forward to, in the spring, sort of putting together webinars, panels, etc. It might be nice to kind of get the chapter involved, but those panels will be around equity, inclusion, diversity, etc. And so, I don't know, it would be kind of nice, I think, to have maybe some partnerships involved where we can get more of that professional development, right, on an ongoing basis, and look at some of these topics and try to see what we can put together. And then I know that I've like sort of been working on it on the side here or there, but I would really like to establish an emerging planners group, or at least have something that is a bit more established as a place for new professionals to kind of gather and connect with each other too. So, but I'm more than happy to help in any capacity, and but just wanted to share that. And I think I put my email in the chat too. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you, Jordan. Now, I have a question about that. Would it be helpful to have a training with, say, as a half day or a couple hour separate session with planners or with members of the chapter that could get this training from that training that you went to in a sense, and then take it to their communities? Or is that training, does that something that you really need to do with your community? So in other words, it's best to do, the training really involves having that community, those community members there. But
yeah, that's a great question. So essentially it would set the framework for how you plan on engaging with your community through the entire decision-making process. So whatever project, decision, et cetera, that you want to make, you know, when you think about, oh, are we going to do a focus group? Are we going to do charrettes, et cetera? It's really thinking about, okay, what are the platforms? Why would we use them? And when would we use them in that process, right? Is it when we're scoping? Is it when we already have options, et cetera? What is the decision-making opportunity for the community members that are involved? So I'm more than happy. So they have, the organization has a training program where you can become like a certified through them. But as far as sort of providing just the basics of what that looks like, et cetera, I just found it so useful, and it really helps to strategize like how to engage. So I'd be more than happy to share what I've learned as part of a webinar series, or to just connect with people on an ongoing basis. But it's essentially meant for those that would be facilitating the engagement. And so they
well, we could have the local chapter of the IACP to International Public Involvement Group make a presentation to planners and give tips for public input and how to not make some, you know, rookie mistakes in getting people out.
Absolutely.
And Helen, do you think that those organizations have also retooled their presentations or their tactics and their techniques and tools to these issues that people are facing, where we were talking about
I think so. I mean, I think so. I think
because of the
media
and the
yeah. I mean, we need to, as community, as planners, we need to talk about social equity and racial justice, and how are we looking for those sort of things in our planning, you know. So let's get a lunch and learn on that, you know, and start forging out ahead. There's a lot of resources.
That's a great idea.
Mike,
all right.
I think Mike had something, if you do.
I actually was scratching my head.
Okay. No worries at all. I'm going to share a whiteboard again, and the topic here is, what are professional development topics that you would be interested in the coming year? And then you can, of course, vote with a green check. And then we need another little thing if you feel like you can contribute to that topic. So let's do a star. Put a star next to it if you feel like you can contribute and are willing to consider that.
Ted, it also could be somebody who's just willing to organize the event.
Great. Yep.
Right.
Excellent point.
That could be, that's, you know, that would be, you may have an interest in it and you may know a great speaker and you just have to kind of get the pieces put together. And Jordan sounds very capable of that.
That is excellent. Yeah, thank you.
So we should put that, okay, yeah.
I mean, I think planners are very powerful in that we can really kind of help communities make the hard left turn out of some of the troubles that we're in.
We'll just give it another minute, unless it starts to magically populate itself.
Again, I don't know if people go up to your view options and do annotate, pull down menu, annotate, and over by text, you can type in.
What about good old fashioned, it's actually totally the wrong phrase. What about information relating to the longer term community impacts of COVID?
Yeah, I think that's a topic.
I'll use the board myself. Let's see.
Yeah. How do you think COVID will change the way we do business priorities of the community? That's a good one. What a pro forma actually is.
And then just FYI, when using the whiteboard, Ted, since you are the one that created it, you have the ability to select text and move it around. So if anyone ends up just typing something on top of, you can just move that around, just FYI.
Oops, okay. All right.
Aha.
I think there could be more focus on real estate development, because I think that, you know, if planners had an appreciation for what developers are up against in terms of the pro forma and that, I think that's actually, that would really help. And we have a whole department at the U that is real estate development.
If I moved your stuff anyway, keep me honest on that.
Yeah, maybe while we're here, I know that we usually have a lot of topics at conferences. How much interest is there in these half day or brown bag lunch, 2-hour sessions on this, or 1-day sessions that are not part of a conference. I will always just wonder how much interest there is in that. We've had over the years success in some years, not so much in others.
Yeah, I think just over an hour and a half at a lunchtime might provide for more flexibility. When you do a half day or a day, it's a commitment.
Yeah. And one of the benefits, I guess, with this we could do it with this type of a platform with Zoom or something. You can also engage the people that are not on the Wasatch Front.
Well, and also you can start to build a library of resources that people can just listen to the stuff at their own time.
Exactly. Good point.
So we're not going to break it into a new whiteboard, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of whiteboard real estate to the closing question, just in recognition of us having about 5+ minutes left. So if you have any thoughts on that last thing, that's great. And but we don't need to force that. The professional development topic stuff is something that we would give straight to our programs committee, and then they can start to pencil them in. And let me tell you that one of the nice things about COVID-19, sorry, but you can't actually say that, is that the process of putting on a professional development event is much easier when you don't have to line up a facility and food. And it's not just easier for the presenters, but it's easier, I think, for attendees too. You can just, obviously you pour it in and you pour it out. So, we can take, I think, part of the challenge that Helen suggested, which is let's get more content out there.
And I think some of these professional development topics tackle some of these at the noon, 1-hour session. And the social and the networking, possibly with this type of a thing, but I think also socializing and networking is more difficult with COVID. And getting out even to a lunch, that's going to be difficult. How do you do that? So I like this one.
Now, go ahead, Kirsten.
Something outside. I think that's a good idea. Something we should think about. Maybe it's
that is an excellent idea. Some kind of friendly competition. Is there an idea on what that might be?
I say planner band. I've been actively involved in the California APA chapter and the Oregon APA chapter. Both of those had their closet musicians out there. Planners are great musicians. Get them all together and do a planner band. Everyone will come together and love it.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
All right.
I sold my drum set, but someone has one.
See?
There was a comment put in the chat bar earlier that I don't think we got to. Jordan mentioned the Emerging Planners group. That is something, Jordan, I think it would be really great for us to highlight next year. And if you're willing to be part of that, I think it would be terrific. But the other is a group that exists, and I think we can get the groups identity out there, and maybe they program more activities, but that is women in planning as well. So now you're hearing emerging, which is often young, but it's not always young planners. Emerging, you're hearing women. There has been some question about what we do to serve or get the diverse community involved, racially diverse or what have you, in Utah. And so that's floating out there. And if you have some thoughts about that, that's great. I do want to just make a very basic pitch. If you are interested in even just considering being part of the APA-Utah Executive Committee, I think, Kirsten, is it all right? You can reach out to me until the end of the calendar year. You can reach out to Kirsten after that. Maybe the best thing is to just copy both of us and talk about some of the things that you are interested in. Core elements of the work of APA-Utah include trainings, programming, communications, especially a growing amount of social media communications. That's really a lot about getting information out there about issues. So those are some core elements. There's also a legislative committee that tracks the work at Utah's Capitol Hill and engages in it. And it has been actually a budding committee over time. And then lastly, we have area representatives in each part of the state. So there is sometimes a predisposition in Utah to be focused in and around the Greater Wasatch Front, and we're trying to not just be a Greater Wasatch Front kind of entity. So if that helps you think about those things, you can put something in the chat bar. You can just reach out to me or Kirsten. And I will, for the sake of time, save this whiteboard. Yep. Kirsten, if you want to identify any remaining chat items that we didn't get to. And
there is one. How does a small city participate when there's no official planner on staff? We only have a planning commission that meets 2 times a month.
Participate.
And I'm thinking maybe the area representative. I think it depends where the city is, but reaching out to the area representative who could organize something for the city, or I mean, certainly on our website there's resources, but I think that would be good. Good resource. I also saw something down here, APA listserv. That's more, for specific topics.
Okay, I don't need it to do anything else to add, except that I will say that this is my last event of any great size, probably while I'm president, and I've just enjoyed being the chapter president. I've really liked it a lot, and I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I hope that that you're getting good value out of your chapter, and if you're not, that we want to hear about it. And I'm not going to drop off the face of the earth. I'll still be serving as the past president next year. And then Kirsten, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, just thank you everybody for attending. I hope if you do have comments of how we can improve your experience with the chapter, that you will reach out and contact us. And one thing that we have really upped the content on the APA and asked the executive committee to write articles or find articles that they find would be interesting, and we'll put that on the APA website, our chapter website. So if you haven't been there in a while, I think it would be good to check it out. And also, if you have an article you would like to write, we'd love to put that on as well.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Ted.
Oh, I was just going to say, so some of the questions that were posed are really good, meaty ones, and maybe we didn't get to them. And Melinda, I'd love to follow up with you as an example of how a small city might participate. I just wanted to say that. Go ahead, Katie, and we'll adjourn.
Oh, I just wanted to thank both of you, Ted and Kirsten. And Ted, thank you so much for all that you have done for the Utah chapter. We appreciate everything. And Kirsten, we're excited that you're going to be taking over, and we're excited to continue working with you. So for the attendees, as a reminder, all of these sessions have been recorded, and you'll be able to access them following the conference. I know there was a lot of great conversation held today, so if you want to go back and look at anything that was said, or want to share with your coworkers, constituents, please do so. Again, thanks to today's presenters, and thank you for attending. We hope you all have a great weekend.